For us, or our point of view is that you have to have production and sourcing nailed down before anything.
Hey, my name is Felix Tia. I'm the host of Shopify Masters, a weekly podcast powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. Each week, we invite entrepreneurs like you to share what they've learned growing successful e-commerce businesses. In this episode, you'll learn how they got their first 100 customers, how do you know if you have product market fit, and how they determine pricing of their luxury products. Before we dig into our show, I want to let you know that as we all find new ways to grow and pivot during the effects of the crisis, the team at Shopify put together The Navigator, which is a free weekly curated newsletter filled with resources, insights, and tips to help businesses adapt and navigate this time of uncertainty and beyond. Sign up now for The Navigator at shopify.com/SMB-newsletter. Today, I'm joined by Aaron from Caraa. Caraa sells handbags reimagined, the perfect balance of form and function designed for life in motion, and was started in 2015 and based out of New York. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, thanks, Felix, for having me.
Yeah, so the idea behind this business came when I believe you and your partner both moved to New York City. Tell us more about that. Like, what did you discover once you had spent life in New York City?
Yeah. So a little background behind the brand. So, both my co-founder and I, we do kind of, we always say that we don't come from fashion, especially myself, but we do, in the sense that my family has been doing handbag manufacturing, luxury handbag manufacturing for the last 30 years. And my co-founder, Carmen Chen Wu, she is a CFDA awarded fashion designer, spent a lot of her time, working with, high-end design houses in terms of designing for the runway. So, when we came together back in 2015 in the city, we obviously knew the handbag space fairly well. A lot of cool things happening in the space, especially for a lot of luxury houses. When I think about some of the larger kind of couture type of brand names coming from Europe, again, very cool things coming from design standpoint. But one thing we felt that that needed a little bit of improvement, I guess, it's lack of functionality. Right. So, woman handbag or handbag specifically plays such an intricate part of her wardrobe on a daily basis. But we just felt that a lot of the handbags couldn't have the functionalities that would keep up with her active lifestyle, at least for the millennial consumers that we initially aim to service. So the idea behind the brand really is around, creating a luxury item at, kind of direct to consumer price point or contemporary price point. But very much focused on functionality and keeping up with the lifestyle. So, and I'm sure we're going to get into a little more later on, but, if you take out one of our hero products, our studio bag, the bag is produced in the same factories as some of the world's leading luxury brands from Europe. We keep the prices below $400 in terms of the price point, so it's a lot less than a luxury item. And when it comes to functionality, you will see that, you can wear a bag in 3 different ways. So as a backpack, crossbody, satchel. And then it's going to have different compartments for different type of activities that you would do throughout the day. So there's a compartment for the gym, compartment for your tech, compartment for your makeup, wallets, keys, phones, and so on and so forth. So, so that's kind of the idea behind how we initially started, is to really give her, right, because it's mainly a woman's brand, a product that really can keep up with her lifestyle and something that she, wouldn't really need 2 or 3 more bags throughout the day. Just one bag will serve all the purposes.
So it sounds like an amazing partnership of multiple or 2 different experiences and skill sets combined that obviously contributes a lot to the success of your business. Now, how did you meet your co-founder?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So, we both are from Chinese background, but we both grew up in Spain, actually. So, and it's funny because, unlike the U.S., Spain, similar to some of the European countries, back in the 70s and 80s, there weren't that many immigrants per se. And, we actually came to know each other more from our time spent in New York. But when we start connecting and start sharing some notes and war stories about, how our time in Spain, we realized that our families actually knew each other. Matter of fact, our grandparents at one point did business together, which was,
wow.
We always joke around, it's somewhat of a fate. So yeah, I mean, and it's somewhat magical, right, to a certain extent, because when we came together, and we started discussing different ideas, and full disclosure, Caraa wasn't really our first venture. We had a sourcing agency before that, helping smaller brands to source and manufacture out of Asia. But, when we started kind of coming together and thinking through just a number of different ideas, we quickly realized that, at the end of the day, we really like the entrepreneurial path. We, specifically love the manufacturing, supply chain, and handbag industry, just because we feel that even though it's a mature industry, there were some areas that was ripe for disruption. So it's, we came together, it was a perfect time in our lives to kind of start thinking about, kind of the next chapter in our lives. If you kind of look at ourselves in terms of skill sets, we always say that we have the perfect yin and yang. I'm the business dev, the outgoing, a little bit more, more salesy type of personality. And Carmen, besides her kind of design background and product background and just overall taste making background, she grounds me quite a bit, right? So I always say this, the number one advice I give to a lot of entrepreneurs that we get a chance to work with or meet is, if you do end up having a business partner, which I fully recommend, it's make sure that you find somebody that can complement your skill sets, that can be really great at what you're not, so that it's a kind of a complementary relationship as you thrive.
Now, how do you know that you are a good fit? How can you pick that up as early as possible to understand that you are, going to this long-term relationship with a partner that is actually going to be a good fit over the long term?
Yeah, it's tricky. A lot of it, it's almost like dating, right? It's like, how do you know? Some people see, start dating and realize that, let's date for a while and see what happens. Some people date is like, nope, I'm marrying you tomorrow. I'm getting a ring and taking you to church, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for us, I think it was very clear to us pretty early that we share a lot of the same values. And I think it has to do a lot with the fact that we grew up in a European country, from Chinese background. I think, we were, I guess you can call it first generation immigrants. Our parents were all born in China, and, we were the first generation that really had the opportunity to really grow outside of China, still with very kind of connected roots back to China. But, I think when you are growing up in that kind of way, I feel like a lot of your values are very much the same. We both think about investments the same way. We both think about value the same way. We both think about how to service the customer the same way. So when we kind of sat down and started kind of comparing notes, if you may, it became pretty quickly, you quickly realize that there's a lot of similarities in how we're thinking about the world, if you may. But even though our skill sets, like I mentioned before, are very, very, very different. So it is somewhat of art, and I, like I said, often allude to dating a little bit. It's like, it's a little bit of dancing in the beginning, but, for us, we both kind of looking back and said, pretty quickly we realized that, what, there's something here and we should definitely give it a try. And, 5.5 years later, here we are with a thriving brand. So we think we made the right choice.
Yeah. I think one thing you mentioned, I've heard other entrepreneurs mention too, that have partnerships, is having the shared value systems helps you overcome a lot of the differences that will come up. Like in any relationship, dating, marriage, or co-founders, there are going to be differences and potential clashing of work styles, especially when you mention how you want to find a partner that complements and not just repeats your skill sets, which could lead to maybe differing priorities, differing beliefs on what's more important. How do you make sure that you work well together with someone that is a complement, which it usually means an opposite in a lot of cases from you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think communication is key. I think you need to establish very early on to openly communicate. Not holding anything back from each other, and in an amicable and polite way, right? I mean, we never really get into any shouting match, if you may. But yeah, it's having a really open communication and from the get go set expectations of what's important for each other, right? To your point, sometimes the priorities do conflict a little bit, but it's all about, again, having a conversation and have the ability to compromise, right? And say, look, it is a team effort at the end of the day. And this is especially true as our team started to grow beyond just Carmen and I when we first started the brand, is to kind of not only just have the communication among ourselves, but even with our first and second and third and fourth and 10th hire, right? In terms of like what is important to them. And so it's a company culture that we kind of a strive to continue as we grow as a brand. But yeah, communication probably is the top number one priority for us in terms of the company, as far as having that open communication and open dialogue among each other.
Got it. Yeah. So you mentioned that before starting Caraa, you both had started a sourcing agency, which I believe you mentioned was helping companies domestically, I guess here in the United States, source manufacturing overseas. Can you say a little more about that? Like, how useful was that experience when starting Caraa?
Yeah, so we both have passion about product, right? I mean, we're product geeks at heart. And so even before starting brands is very difficult. And I'm going to get into it afterwards a little bit. Anybody who has attempted the start of the brand will tell you that it's a long journey. It's a treacherous road. So we were kind of didn't really want to get into the product or didn't really want to get into the brand side when we first started working together, right? But we knew that our passion was around supply chain, manufacturing, global supply chain, logistics, just because, my background is in finance, but like I said, my family's been doing it for so long. That's kind of embedded in our DNA. And similar story with Carmen, even though she comes from kind of a luxury designer background, her family has always been in manufacturing supply chain as well. We started, a small sourcing agency called Caraa Partners. And the idea behind it is we saw back then, this was 6.5 years ago, back then we realized that there were a few large sourcing agencies that were helping, larger brands, in the US, but other parts of the world too, right? So think of these are the Walmarts, the Costco's, the Tommy Hilfigers, the Victoria's Secrets. Large brands that work a lot with sourcing agencies in order to help them to not only just source from different parts of the world, but also manage logistics and supply chain. And as results, they're able to enjoy a lot of the benefits that comes with sourcing agencies, because sourcing agencies, especially if you work with larger brands, have a lot of scale, meaning that you can get a lot cheaper price for your product, but of course, you have to have a lot of volume. We kind of wanted to take that, but give it to the little guys, right? We said, okay, that's great, but what about those emerging brands that has been doing business for a little bit of time, but it's looking to scale, that has been maybe manufacturing primarily domestically, but it's ready to take the next leap. Whether it's China, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Mexico, right? So the idea was to kind of taking that sourcing model, but really kind of working and helping smaller brands to scale. And it was a widely successful agency. We grew, very rapidly in the first 2 years. But then, like I said, we started exploring the idea of Caraa just mainly because we just felt that space that I described before back then, we felt that we could actually tell a story that nobody was really doing it, right? So, back to my initial kind of idea and value proposition, how do we give a functional bag that is truly luxurious? And we can claim that because, like I said, we make it from the same factory as some of the world's leading luxury brands. We source it from some of the tanneries and mills, the same tanneries that work for some of the European houses, but keeping the prices really affordable, right? So giving that value product, but really keeping the design really functional. And one of the things I didn't mention before is we knew from the start that we also wanted to go DTC right away. If you look at our business, we do have a healthy amount of wholesale partners currently, but, going directly to customers was very important to us. And obviously Shopify plays a big role in that. But it was something that is important to us because then we can have that two-way dialogue with our customers, which helped us tremendously, which I will touch on later on. So I know I kind of addressed the question with a bunch of different answers, but I think the pivot between agency to brand was really kind of knowing that we have the strength of design and supply chain. So we know that we have the kind of the goods to really create a brand. But again, most importantly, we just felt that there was a void that needed to be filled. And we took a shot at it. And I think, because we were one of the first to market, we're able to actually establish this category quite strongly, I think, for the short period of time that we've been around.
And you recognize that there was a void, but then specifically you are going to be able to fill it because of your sourcing agency experience, or was it something else that
Correct.
you saw? Okay, got it.
Correct.
Now, from an entrepreneur's perspective, because it sounded like you worked with a lot of more smaller brands, are you talking about like solo founders, like small teams? Like, what is do you see an advantage for an entrepreneur, like a typical entrepreneur that's listening to this podcast as maybe, solo founder or a team of 10 or less? Does it make sense for them to go with a sourcing agency, or can they do it themselves? Like, what's your recommendation these days?
I think it depends a little bit on your product and your market a little bit. So if I think about kind of the main customers that we work with on the sourcing side, usually is below 20 to $25 million in sales. So, a thriving business, but still smaller and easier to manage. So that's kind of more or less give you an idea in terms of the size of the business. As far as manufacturing, look, actually all of the customers that we work with on the sourcing side, they already have, some type of footprint in terms of manufacturing, right? Whether it's locally or when I say locally, domestically, U.S. or overseas. I think a lot of them come to us for different reasons. I would say some of them is looking to consolidate. I can think of one customer that will come to us and say, "Look, I manufacture a little bit in the U.S., a little bit in Mexico, a little bit in Canada, and a bunch of them in Malaysia." Right? So I can't keep up. It's logistics a nightmare. And these particular customers do a lot of wholesale. So every time each season comes, I go nuts, right? In terms of managing logistics and so on and so forth. How can you help us to consolidate? So that's one of the reasons that you will want to go to a sourcing agency from a consolidation and simplification standpoint to help you kind of streamline your operations a little bit, right? So that could be one. So if you're in a similar boat where you just have a lot of different areas that you're touching on from a sourcing manufacturing standpoint, sure, think about working maybe with a sourcing agency that can help you actually manage through that. Some other brands come to us because they have been paying domestic prices, enjoying domestic volumes, but it's looking to scale. And for whatever reason they can't or don't want to pay domestic prices in terms of scale, they're thinking about going overseas. Going overseas, it's a minefield, right? A lot of people think that you can just pick up a website, find a few factories, start emailing them, and voila, you can show up in China one day and start producing. Sure, at 1,000 feet level, that's what happens. But, it's a minefield. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong in logistics and supply chain. So, I always recommend to my customers, right? If you've never done it before, sure, either hire somebody in-house who have done this before or go with a sourcing agency that can help you kind of hold your hands a little bit. 2, 3, 4 years down the road, when you are mature enough, you can think about making changes, whatever that change is. But I don't see anything wrong with, again, you can perfectly hire a good logistic production person to help you through that. But, sourcing agencies a lot of times fill that gap when you don't have that kind of access to the kind of resources.
So it sounds like for most smaller brands that are starting out, they probably don't need a sourcing agencies, more for brands that have a bit of a more mature and established business first. So now when you recognize that there was this void, you and your co-founder, and decided to go to start attacking it, what were some of the most critical skill sets that you now had to pick up now that you're more focused on building a brand?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and again, you're probably going to hear from different people, different answers. For us, or our point of view is that you have to have production and sourcing nailed down before anything, right? So, and there's so many great designers out there, and we're fortunate enough to work with a bunch of them through our sourcing agency. But the reality is that having an idea is just part of the equation. I think, getting that sampled, produced, shipped, sold, that is a mammoth effort, right? So for us, we knew if we didn't really have that kind of supply chain production background, and we purely had design and marketing, I probably think twice before starting any brand, really. So I would say for us and for any entrepreneurs that we meet and mentor and so on and so forth, that's the number one thing we always ask is, what does your supply chain look like? and how you're going to produce this, how you're going to scale up and down, and what you're going to do if something happens to a particular location, if you need to pivot, right? So those are some of the more intricate questions that we ask. Once you have the product, you have the substance, right? Because a lot of times, I always say your product you design to substance, marketing to a certain extent, it's how you tell the brand story. I think once you have the product, then you have the right to start thinking about storytelling and communicating to your customers and start building, kind of your community based on the product. But like I said, and again, you might hear this, some other people would definitely disagree with me and have other points of view. But for me, product is substance. At the end of the day, you're selling product. You're not selling fluff, right? So if your product is not great and you don't have a unique point of view and you don't even have the production and supply chain to produce it, I think your business plan should probably be relooked at.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I think there's a lot of people on your side where they are product focused, product first business, and believe the same philosophies that you believe. For someone out there then that is looking to enter a space like fashion, or a space where product is the most important aspect of the business, it sounds like a lot to learn, a lot of kind of like dark arts of like manufacturing and supply chain. Like, where would someone even begin if their goal is to build some kind of fashion brand, but don't have any experience with manufacturing? And if that is where they should start first, if they listening to your advice and that's where they want to start first, how do they even start there?
Yeah, so I would say, when you're just starting, right? So without even, because I think I mainly touched on businesses that are a little more established and it's looking to scale. I think if I take a step back and talking to those first-time entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs just starting at the stealth mode age or stealth mode stage, I would say, of your business, forget about overseas manufacturing. You're going to get killed with minimums. You're going to kill with complexity. Stick to local manufacturing, prototype. Come up with a set of prototype. Don't think about mass production. Think about small production. First and most important thing is prove your concept, right? And, going back to kind of touching on Shopify a little bit, there are tools out there like Shopify that can allow you to actually test your concept very quickly and very easily. Your first prototype is not going to be perfect. I think if you clearly communicate that with your customers a little bit, I think they'll be a lot more forgiving in the beginning. Don't pretend something that you're not. Don't go out there and even if you're like, one person company with 30 products, or 30 units, don't pretend that you're the next, Nike but, just be transparent with your customers that, listen, we're a startup, and obviously there are, kind of a crowdfunding channels that you can also, platforms that you can also use, be straightforward with your customers and tell them your story in a genuine way and prove the concept with your product does have a market fit, right? Product market fit, and that's a term that I think, a lot of people borrow from tech side, the tech world, right? Is the first question that I ask a lot of people I interact and meet with is, how do you know you have a product market fit, right? You have a concept, you have an idea, you have this hunch of this thing that you want to build. But that's your hunch. It's in your mind. You haven't proved anything yet, right? So how do you go and prove that your hunch, your concept is valid and there's a market for it, that you can actually make a business, right? I joke around with some entrepreneurs I meet is this a project, right? Is this a home project or is this a business? And there's nothing wrong with projects. You can have your day job and keep a project aside, but if you have a project, don't treat it as a real P&L, because you can think of it as a project, as a hobby, if you may, right? But if once you think about business, then the question is, can you sell it? And now you profit by selling it, so on and so forth. So I think tying that back a little bit to your point or to your question about how do you go about that from the production side, and I would say forget about mass production, forget about cost to even in the beginning. Just prove your concept as quickly as you can to prove that you have product market fit. If you don't, go back to the drawing board. If you do, then think about your second batch, third batch, and eventually think about mass production.
Okay, so I like this. So let's break this down a little bit. So you first said that you have to first make sure you have product market fit, and then prove that the concept is a valid one. Is that that's something that actually can sell? So do you have a prototype at this point? Like, what are you putting out into the market to test if there's a product market fit?
Yeah. So for us in the beginning, we started the brand initially with 50 units. It was a 50 units. And I used that as a caveat because really the first 50 units were sold right away, but it was all friends and family, so that never counts. I always joke around and say like, look, your first 50 batch, your mom and your brother and your cousins bought it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call that a product market fit test yet, right? But our true test was the first 100 units that we made, and it did sell really well. We got a lot of feedback, and we were very transparent with our customers in the beginning in terms of, listen, we are an emerging brand. This is kind of our story. This is what we're trying to fix in the market space. Here's our products, and we welcome any feedback. And our customers, or the first 100 customers, and I don't remember sadly all 100 of them, but I do remember actually the first 20. Those 20 customers stuck with me, because those 20 customers actually give us very great feedback. They bought it back, even though in the beginning there were a few issues with some of the design aspect of the bag. They came back and said, I'm keeping the bag, and here's the reason I'm keeping it, but here are some of the recommendations in terms of making the bag better. So that's one area that that's how we went about in terms of proving product market fit.
Okay.
We also had the chance to work with a lot of influencers in the beginning. That's kind of our core community. We work with our kind of influencer community that we had a relationship or previous relationship with, to kind of test the product and get the feedback that way as well. Right. So you don't want to launch the product going to a blind. So you want to use people that that will be your customers, and have them test and give you feedback along the way. So, again, just a couple of different ways that we went about proving the product, proving the product market fit, and making sure the product actually is going to be a viable product.
Got it. Okay, so you mentioned that you have some influencers that you're working with, and at this stage, it's still kind of a beta stage where you aren't sure. You still got to prove that the product is a product market fit. Now, when you're working with like influencers, how similar are they to the actual market? Like, are they skewing more towards a certain way, or they're kind of skewing towards a different way, depending on like how they compare to your actual target customers?
Yeah, it's I think a mixed bag. Unfortunately, I think in fashion specifically, there are a bunch of influencers that we had the privilege to work with in the past. So, and they all vary. Depending on the influencer you work with. On the fitness side, you would say that a lot of them, their followers are very much like our target customers. So you approach marketing slightly different when you work with that particular influencer. And on the fashion and lifestyle side, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So I think it comes down a little bit to understanding the influencer that you work with, and get to know her and get to know her audience, right? And depending on who follows her, I think you change your questions and your goal of testing slightly different depending on who they are. So it's not a kind of a one size fit all. It really is kind of a again, first and foremost, build a connection and build the relationship with the influencer, but then asking those questions of like who are the people who are following you, and what does that mean for my brand?
Mm-hmm. Now, did you know, is that how you got the initial, eyeballs to get to sell those first 100 units through those influencers, or are there other ways to try to get just some kind of test customers to buy?
Yeah, boy. I mean, in the beginning was everything. So we didn't do advertising for a long time, actually, paid advertising, just because we wanted to create an organic community before anything, right? I mean, this day and age, there's so many venture-backed retail brands that are popping out left and right, and before even taking any time building their own core community, they start buying ads left and right, which first of all, it's not a sustainable business model in my opinion, but also unfortunately for brands like ours, it creates a lot of bad noise for us. So we didn't want to do that. we wanted to create an organic community, for the first two and a half years, really. And to answer your question in terms of how we went about generating traffic and putting eyeballs on the brand, you just have to test. I mean, we test it all, right? We tested from standing in the corner, in Soho, and handing out flyers, asking people, have you heard of Caraa? Because we like to tell you our story, all the way to, getting on national television, right? We were invited by, the Lifetime network to appear in Project Runway. And that was a great opportunity to get on. So I gave you two very drastic examples in terms of you go from street corner, essentially telling the story of your brand and the street corner to anybody that want to hear listening to you, all the way to national TV. And that goes a little bit with, kind of the entrepreneurial spirit a little bit, right? You have to be relentless.
Right. So would you recommend then the early focus for anyone out there that is trying to test product market fit but doesn't have customers? That should be your only focus, just any way possible to find some target customers to test your product?
Absolutely. Number one priority, is to, you shouldn't give it for free. Because there's a certain cost that you went into you producing the product, right? But it's getting as many people's hand and eyeballs on your product as possible, getting the question of product market fit, and then you're not gonna get it right the first time. I've never seen a brand that got it right the first time. Even if you listen to Nike and how Phil Knight started the brand, the Nike product was horrendous in the beginning, right? But that's okay. That's okay because your goal is to get people to give you feedback as quickly as possible, and then evolve and improve and elaborate from that initial feedback. So to answer your question, absolutely. I think that should, in my opinion at least, that should be the number one thing you focus on. Forget about marketing, forget about anything else. Get the product market fit right.
Yeah, it's amazing how I think a lot of entrepreneurs will shoot their shot once and then fail and then just abandon the entire thing. I think going out there, putting a product out there and it fails, that's great because now you actually can get feedback on what needs to change. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review on iTunes to let us know what you think or what you'd like to hear more of. Now, let's get back to the interview. Now, we talk about product market fit. If you come back and you find out that there is not a product market fit yet, where do you go next? Like, do you look at the product? Do you look at the market? Maybe you're targeting the wrong people. Like, what is that next step that you take just so that you don't kind of start chasing your tail?
Fail quick, fail cheap. That's I always say that to people that ask us about kind of, in similar situation that you described, right? Is you to your point, you will fail. So the point is, if you go into it with the idea of you will fail, the next question is how do you do it quickly and as cheaply as possible? Because if you take all your funds, right, all the money you have, you finally kind of get the courage to start a business, and you've got the loans, you got maybe some money from friends and family, and if you put all that money into the first test and you fail, you're in a tough spot. So don't do that, right? Try to test as cheaply as possible, and then if you fail, that's okay. Have a contingency plan and say, okay, what's plan B? And the most important part, a lot of times, I think, is also just understanding truly why you fail. I think people a lot of times gets too bogged down, I think, and too honing on the idea, oh gosh, I failed, versus really truly understand the root cause of the failure, And if you dig deep enough, there's always that one cause. Could be pricing, could be product, could be market, could be seasonality, could be, there's 1,000 different things. And obviously this varies a little bit depending on the category that you're in. But yeah, fail quick and fail fast, and fail cheaply. That's what I would say. And have the courage, a little bit to stand up. Again, it's not about when and how you fall. It's all about how you get up from that, right? So I think, but it's setting expectations before you start is that you will fail, and that's great. You shouldn't see it as a failure. You should see it as a learning experience.
Yeah, I think that's important about failing quick and cheap because you want that momentum behind you. Otherwise, there's such a long periods in between. It's really easy to lose that motivation and momentum. And then, of course, the budget to stay in the game, right? If you're spending so much money failing, you're going to run out of, run out of cash pretty soon. Now, for your particular situation, how much did you know about your customer, who your customer was ever, like at the beginning? How much did that change over time?
It changed a lot. I mean, you're always going to have your target customer, your actual customer, right? And you obviously don't know what your actual customer is until you really start selling. And matter of fact, I would argue that you will continue to learn throughout the lifetime of the brand because the actual customer will evolve over time, and your goal or your job really is to evolve with her or with him in some cases. For us, I would say we got about 55% right in terms of our customer base. We were targeting active women, millennial, living primarily in urban areas. We were somewhat of we didn't really look into kind of the average household income and ethnicity. We didn't look in too much into that. For us, it was more just kind of a lifestyle, understanding, kind of how does she live? And I think once we understood that, I think it was a lot more apparent for us to understand who she was, or how we want to go about targeting her, if you may. But yeah, I would say I got about 55% right. I think the rest we're still learning. But just have the expectations that your actual customers, it's not going to be the same as your target customers. So just be ready to change.
Got it. So definitely want to talk a little bit about how learning this affects things like the product decisions and marketing decisions in a second. Before we get there, how do you pull out this information in the first place? Like when you do have, let's say you hustle, maybe you're selling on the street corners, like you said, which is obviously very accessible for anyone out there that wants to try to get first customers. If you're able to first get those 100 customers, what questions or how do you get the valuable feedback to actually make decisions?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of different things, and really there's no one answer because it really depends on the data point, the feedback you get for different parts. I think you would interpret it differently. On the product side, we always break down the product feedback in a couple of different compartments or a couple of different kind of segments. When it comes to functionality and features and so on and so forth, we do listen quite a bit to our customers, right? I mean, and when I say that, it's all about kind of number of pockets or the size of the pockets, the location of the pockets, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to that type of feedback, we do take it very seriously, and I know the product team takes that very, very seriously. When it comes to product, when it comes to taste making, design, when it comes to aesthetics, that's where our creative director and my co-founder kind of takes the lead a little bit, right? Truthfully speaking, the way I think about it is that that's the art behind our brand. Because we think of ourselves as a tastemaker, because our co-founder is a tastemaker and she is a fashion designer, the beauty and I think the uniqueness about her or any artist, if you may, is that they're able to set trends versus following trends, right? And what that means is a lot of times she will be able to tell you something that you need before you even know it, right? So that's, I think, the difference in terms of design a little bit. When we are the one who's setting the trends and leading the trend and being the tastemaker versus I think some other brands will go about design more in the data way, looking at what's the trend and then let's catch up to the trend, right? So that's how we think about in terms of gathering product feedback or feedback in general from kind of our customers and how to incorporate that into the brand.
I think that's super insightful where it's basically the feedback that you get when it is more on the functionality side, that's driven more by the customer. But if you are a tastemaker, a trend-setting brand, the form is driven by the brand itself.
Absolutely. That's where that's Carmen's backyard, right? I mean, it's the area where she still is, looking for input and feedback, I think from not just the customer, but, from the market, from the world, from the external world, if you may. But this is an area where she's very clear that she's making the call, and again, that's the juju behind the brand. It's if you look at a lot of European fashion houses, at the end of the day, right? We're talking about different brands between Caraa and the European brand, but at the end of the day, if I think about those European brands, the reason that you're paying such a premium, at the end of the day, it really is for the taste of the designer, the taste of that brand, right? So to your point, we're very clear about that. Is that when it comes to aesthetics, when it comes to form, right? Because we always say we balance form and function. When it comes to form, is our call. I think we don't want to be influenced by the external when it comes to that. So that's on the product side in terms of how we take product feedback or external feedback from our customers. And on the marketing side, I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Obviously, if you know certain things about your customers in terms of their social graphics or demographics and so on and so forth, you probably want to target your marketing messaging differently, just because you kind of want to resonate with your customers once you know who she is. So there, it's a little bit more dynamic, in terms of how you take the market information and put that into your brand, how to leverage that data, if you may. So that's that. But yeah, on the product side, I think we're pretty comfortable with kind of the formula that we come up with in terms of how do we go about designing and producing value product for the customers.
Got it. Now I want to talk a little bit about the pricing. At what point does that come in where you're able to test and finalize pricing for your product?
Yeah, I think I would say in the beginning you should really think about cost plus. And I don't want to be I have a finance background, so I don't want to too geeked out in terms of the different pricing models. But I always say cost plus is probably something you want to think about when you first start a brand. I think once your brand becomes a little more established, and when I say a little more established, I would say at least being in business for 5 to 10 years, where people start knowing you and wanting to come to you and start trusting you more and giving you more goodwill, right? In finance, we call it goodwill that's sitting on your balance sheet. So that's the goodwill that you generate over time. Then you can think about value-driven pricing, where you can start thinking about charging premiums and I would never tell you how much a Hermes bag or a Birkin bag will actually cost to make, right? I can tell you probably it's not the tens of thousands of dollars they charge, but they're Hermes, so they can charge value-driven pricing, right? That's not a cost plus model. So, but in the beginning, I think for those who are, from your audience who are listening to this, who are thinking about starting for the first time and how to set the price, I think it's a combination of primarily cost plus, because you've got to cover your bases, but also just doing market research and understand, hey, what are your competitors charging, and what kind of play you want to make. You want to, again, this is a very kind of a case by case answer, just because I think let's say if you are in a category that is a commodity category, right, where in that case price is very sensitive, and so then you're gonna think about what am I competing on price, because you are in a commodity space, or am I competing with something else? If you're in a different space where that your price can be a little more elastic, right? We talk about pricing elasticity and so on and so forth. Then you think about, okay, how elastic do I want to make my pricing? But then if it's lower or higher, what's my value proposition, right, to the customer? So I think it's a little case by case. Again, it's very industry driven, and I think you just gotta do your homework a little bit and think that through. It's a very important point that you bring up, though, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs fail to think about that in the early stages. Obviously, most people think they just want to maximize the margin as much as possible, but I think it's an important question to answer right off the bat in terms of, hey, what's your pricing going to look like?
Yeah, and is this something that you have to keep in mind early on when you're going through this validation of the product market fit? To like, how much do you need to know off the bat? Is this profitable, or can this be profitable?
Yeah, well, that should be a question that you should answer right away. Maybe to my earlier point, maybe it's okay to not be profitable for the first week or first month, because you're going through that testing period, whenever the testing period means for you. But, if you don't have a profitable business, you have a hobby. You don't have a business, right? I mean, it's an expense. It's a personal expense that you get to write it down from your personal expenses at the end of the year, right? It's not a P&L. So profitability has to always be there. I think, is it okay to change your pricing throughout your journey? Sure, everybody does it. Is it recommended? I like to not change pricing and have the rigor to not to do that, right? Just because even though you could argue in the beginning your reach is small, right? You have a smaller customer base. Those customers are still going to be loyal to you if you treat them well. And I just believe that every single customer counts, and I don't want to lose the small group of people that I create a connection with in the early stages because, I didn't have my stuff together and messed up pricing. You know what I mean? So it's an important question. I think, obviously, like I said, if you need to change it down the road to protect your profitability, do it, but get it right. Get it right early on. I think it's important.
Got it. Now, I want to jump back to the earlier question about now knowing the lifestyle of your customer. Can you give us some actual examples of how this played out in terms of marketing? Once you understood more about your customer, how did that change how you marketed the product?
Yeah, like I said, we didn't do much marketing in the beginning. I mean, it was all about, and when you say marketing, I allude mainly to kind of pay marketing or pay media, right? We didn't. I mean, it was a lot of it. It's, a little bit of hassling to your point earlier. So just, kind of attend events and try to, get included in communities or trunk shows or, however you think the best, cheapest way you can to get your product in front of others, right? I think when I think about marketing in general, we just felt that, first of all, it's a huge expense when it comes to marketing. So we just didn't want to spend the money on that aspect of the business very early on. We didn't have VC funding. We didn't want VC funding in the beginning. So what that translated to was that most of our costs went into product improvements and product development. So truthfully, to be kind of frank, we didn't really have a lot of budget for marketing. Later on, I think, we as we grew as a company and as we started evolving and so on and so forth, I think, marketing became a lot more important of a question to answer. I think Felix, your question was how do we think about marketing, or how do we?
Yeah, just now that once you learn more about your customer and that their lifestyle, how does that play out in your messaging or the way that you market the product?
Yeah, so it's important, right? So half of the battle is understanding who he is. Once you become certain scale, and once we start realizing that we want to start doing more marketing, and this is where a lot of technology comes in play. There's, a handful of vendors I can think of in terms of offering the right platforms to help you understand who your customers are. And once you understand it, I think it's absolutely empirical that you do change and target those customers with different marketing messages. And I mean, there's gazillion material out there that you can read, and obviously you can definitely hire, the right team to actually help you with this as well. But I think, I don't believe in one message fits all. I think if you talk to any savvy marketer, they will probably all agree with me. So the idea is, how do you segment it into the right buckets? Not too many, because then your message gets very diluted, but, you segment it into a few major buckets and then come out with slightly different messages to target them, right? Because, by default, you're going to have different group of people within your customer demographic, right? You're going to have the ones that love your brand, but don't want to spend, maybe as much as, that your MSRP is, and looking for deals. You talk to them in one way. You have the other group of people that really, it's not really price sensitive, but really want a message or wants a product or something that resonates with the lifestyle, that want to feel that you're talking to them and having that dialogue with them. You're talking slightly differently. So again, I think understand your demographics, understand your customers is really half of the battle. Once you have that, I would definitely segment your messaging and tailor it as much as you can to the different groups that you have within your customer segmentation.
And are there any tools that you rely on for the segmentation, or any other kind of marketing related tools or apps that you rely on to run the business?
Yeah, there are few. There's definitely a few tools out there. I wish I can give a few shout outs to a few. Honestly, we're still thinking through that a little bit ourselves. The truth is, the good ones out there are very expensive. And you have to kind of answer your question of, can I afford that? Or is it going to return, is the investment going to pay out, if you may? We like to be scrappy, and I think scrappy is good, no matter how big you are as a company. So, we're using a bunch of different tools and kind of put them into SQL internally and hyper analyze them. We find that that's the best way that we get to rack and stack the data in the way we find it interesting and find it insightful, if you may. But no, I like I said, I wish I can give a few shout outs to some platform out there that we work with, but most of the members of my team, they're pretty data savvy, and we SQL is our friend.
Got it. Awesome. So carasport.com is a website, CARAASPORT.com, carasport.com. I'll leave this last question. What's been the biggest lesson that you and the company learned last year that you want to apply this year?
Yeah, I think getting the right team. We would not be who we are without the men and women that works with us on an everyday basis, and we actually looking to expand our team, in a number of different areas. That is critical. I think for the first few years during the ramen periods of any brand, I think that the founder or the co-founders are critical for the business. But once you start getting certain scale, hiring the right team to help you grow and scale is critical. And so we were very fortunate to have found, all the right members of our team. But again, because we're growing, we're scaling, and we're looking to increase our team. So, for all those folks out there, I think looking to create a brand and scale and build something unique and amazing, find the right partner and the right team to help you build. Because I think that you're gonna go a long way if you have that versus not. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and experience, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Shopify Masters, the e-commerce podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs powered by Shopify.